What happens when prejudice collides with reality at 30,000 feet? The boarding line for first class is a place of quiet privilege. But for one passenger, Catherine Beaumont, it was a stage for her own entitlement. When she saw the Harrison family, a black family dressed in comfortable travel clothes, she couldn't stop herself. She mocked them, blocked them, and loudly declared they couldn't possibly afford to be there. But she made one critical mistake. She had no idea who they were. And by the time the jet crew greeted the family by name, her fate was already sealed. The atmosphere in the international terminal at San Francisco International Airport was a familiar kind of chaos. Gate G12 was a sea of anxious travelers, restless children, and the constant, digitized drone of boarding announcements for other flights. The destination, London Heathrow. A long-haul flight, the kind that tests the patience of even the most seasoned flyers. The Harrison family sat quietly near the windows, observing the organized mess. They were a portrait of relaxed, modern travel. The father, Dr. Maddox Harrison, was tall and had a calm, academic air. His attention focused on a battered paperback. His wife, Dr. Elsa Harrison, sat beside him, reviewing a document on her tablet, her expression one of deep concentration. Their children, 15-year-old Maya and 10-year-old Leo, were plugged into their own worlds, Maya listening to music and Leo quietly playing a game on his Switch. They were dressed for comfort, not for show. Maddox wore a simple grey zip-up hoodie over a plain black t-shirt, paired with high-quality, dark grey athletic joggers. Elsa wore a similar, well-made cream-coloured lounge set. Even their carry-on bags, while clearly durable and high-end, Tumi and Rimowa, if one looked closely, were understated, scuffed from dozens of previous journeys. They blended in. To a casual observer, they were just another family, perhaps heading off on a long-saved-for vacation. This assumption was exactly what Catherine Beaumont made. Catherine, seated across from them, was the antithesis of the Harrisons. She was designed to be seen. She wore a pristine, cream-coloured silk blouse, tailored white trousers, and gold jewellery that glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her platinum blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, and her face was a mask of expensive makeup and mild disdain. Her handbag, a large Hermes Birkin in a bright, look-at-me orange, was placed ostentatiously on the seat beside her. She was in the middle of a loud, one-sided phone call. "Anthony, I told you, the Savoy was simply unacceptable. The thread count was appalling," she complained, her voice slicing through the terminal din. "Yes, I switched us to the Dorchester. You can thank me later. No, the lounge here is dreadfully crowded. I'd rather just wait at the gate. At least I can watch the scenery." Her eyes swept the area and landed, with laser focus, on the Harrison family. She looked them up and down. Her upper lip curled just slightly. She saw their comfortable clothes and immediately categorized them. Economy. Probably saving up for years. She turned back to her phone call, but her gaze kept flicking back to them, her judgment already passed and sentence delivered. Leo, tiring of his game, unplugged his headphones and leaned against his father. "Dad, are we boarding soon? I want to see if the new Star Wars movie is on the plane." Maddox smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Soon, buddy. They'll call our zone in just a minute." Zone 1. Catherine Beaumont's head snapped up. Zone 1? That was her zone. That was first class. She looked at them again, her gaze lingering on Maddox's hoodie and Maya's worn-in sneakers. A mistake. They must be mistaken. Just then, the public address system chimed. "Good afternoon, passengers. We are now ready to begin boarding flight 850 to London Heathrow. We would like to invite our active duty military members and families traveling with small children to pre-board at this time." A few people trickled forward. After a pause, the gate agent, a harried-looking woman named Sarah, continued, "We are now pleased to invite our first-class passengers boarding in Zone 1. Please have your boarding passes and passports ready." Catherine stood, smoothed her silk blouse, and grabbed her Birkin. She moved with purpose toward the blue carpet of the first-class lane. As she did, she saw, to her absolute horror, the Harrison family standing up as well. Maddox, Elsa, Maya, and Leo all zipped up their carry-ons and began walking toward the same line. Catherine felt a hot flash of indignation. The nerve. She strode forward, physically planting herself between the family and the boarding scanner, cutting them off. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Maddox paused, thinking he was in her way. "Oh, I'm sorry. After you." "No," Catherine said, not moving. She raised a perfectly manicured finger. "I think you're in the wrong place." "This line," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "is for first class." Maddox's polite smile tightened. "Yes, we know. Thank you." He made to step around her, but Catherine sidestepped, blocking him again. Her voice rose, attracting the attention of the other passengers in the queue. "No, I don't think you do know. Economy boards after the premium zones. You'll have to wait for your zone to be called. It's really not that complicated." Maya, seeing the familiar shade of embarrassment and anger cross her father's face, spoke up. "We are in first class, ma'am." Catherine let out a short, barking laugh. It was a truly ugly sound. "Oh, sweetie, that's adorable. Did you get lost? Are you sure you're not confusing first class with first time flying?" She looked around at the other passengers, seeking validation. A few looked uncomfortable, but most just wanted to get on the plane. "Ma'am," Maddox said, his voice dropping into a register of extreme, patient calm. "I would appreciate it if you would step aside and let my family board." "I will not," Catherine snapped, her face flushing. "It's people like you who hold everything up. You can't just decide to be in first class. You have to pay for it. And clearly," she gestured dismissively at his joggers, "you can't. Don't try to sneak on. It's pathetic." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and venomous. "Sneak on." The gate agent, Sarah, hearing the raised voices, looked up from her computer. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" Catherine spun around, playing the victim. "Yes, this family," she said the word like it was distasteful, "is trying to board with Zone 1. They are holding up the actual first-class passengers. Me." Sarah sighed, the end of my shift exhaustion written all over her face. She looked at Maddox. "Sir, may I see your boarding passes, please?" "Gladly," Maddox said, pulling out his phone. Catherine smirked, crossing her arms, tapping her expensive shoe on the carpet. She was waiting for the beep, beep, beep of rejection, the humiliation, the walk of shame back to the economy seats. Maddox handed his phone to Sarah. She scanned the first QR code. Beep. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison," Sarah said, her eyes flicking to the screen and then back to Maddox, her professional mask shifting slightly to one of dawning recognition. "Seat 1A. She scanned Elsa's. Beep. "Mrs. Harrison. 1D. She scanned Maya's. Beep. 1G. She scanned Leo's. Beep. 1C. Catherine's smirk evaporated. It didn't just fade, it shattered. Her face went slack, her mouth hanging open. "What? That's not possible." Sarah handed the phone back to Maddox, ignoring Catherine completely. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison. Please enjoy your flight to London." "Thank you," Elsa said, giving Catherine a brief, unreadable look. The Harrison family stepped past the still frozen woman. As they walked onto the jet bridge, Leo looked back at his father. "Dad, Why was that lady so mad? Some people just have a lot of trouble with directions, son, Maddox replied quietly, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Catherine, recovering, shoved her own passport at Sarah. That's ridiculous. They probably used all their frequent flyer miles or something. A one-time thing. Sarah scanned her pass. Beep. Welcome aboard, Miss Beaumont. Seat 2A, you're right behind them. The jet bridge was a sterile, windowless tunnel, sloping down toward the massive Airbus A380. The Harrisons walked quietly, the muffled sounds of their rolling bags echoing in the enclosed space. Maya was still simmering. I can't believe she did that, Dad, Maya muttered, her voice low, in front of everyone. People like you. What does that even mean? It means, Elsa said, not breaking her stride, that she is a very unhappy person who needs to believe in a certain world order to feel secure. Her world order just got shaken. It is not your problem, Maya. It's hers. Deep breaths. I know, Mum, but it's just exhausting, Maya replied. It is, Maddox agreed. But we have a rule, remember? We don't let people like that live in our heads for free. She's already paid for her ticket. Let's not give her any more of our space. Behind them, they could hear the sharp click-clack of Catherine Beaumont's heels approaching. She was walking fast, clearly determined to get to her seat, her face a mask of thunderous rage and profound embarrassment. She was fuming. The encounter had not gone as planned. She had been made to look foolish. She was already composing the scathing email she would write to the airline about their unruly passengers and incompetent gate staff. They reached the end of the jet bridge and the bright, open doorway of the aircraft. Standing there, silhouetted against the cabin lights, was the lead flight attendant, or purser. He was a tall man in his late 40s, with silvering hair and an immaculate navy blue uniform. His name tag read, Dylan Armstrong. He held a tablet and was greeting each passenger with a professional, distant smile. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard, sir. Then the Harrison family stepped into view. Dylan Armstrong's entire demeanor changed. The professional mask dissolved into a smile of genuine, uncomplicated joy. His eyes lit up. Maddox! He exclaimed, stepping forward and clapping Maddox on the shoulder. My goodness, it's been too long. Dylan, I had a feeling we might see you. Maddox laughed, shaking his hand warmly. How are you, man? How's Jennifer and the kids? They're great, thanks. Emily just started at Stanford. Can you believe it? Dylan said, before turning to Elsa and giving her a respectful hug. Elsa, you look wonderful. The university treating you well? It's busy, Dylan, but good. It's so lovely to see you. Elsa smiled. Dylan then bent down slightly to the children. And look at you two. Maya, you're practically an adult. And Leo, last time I saw you, you were just, well, smaller. Hi, Mr. Armstrong, Maya said, her earlier tension visibly melting away. Catherine Beaumont had stopped dead 3 feet behind them. She was trapped on the jet bridge, forced to watch this reunion. Her mind was racing. Who was this flight attendant? He wasn't just being polite. This was a family friend. She watched as Dylan, the purser, the man in charge of the entire cabin, acted like a delighted relative. I saw the Harrison name on the manifest, Dylan was saying to Maddox, and I swapped my route just so I could fly with you. Your father told me you were all heading to London for the new exhibit. He sends his love, by the way. He's golfing in Scotland, the lucky guy. He's earned it, Maddox chuckled. We're meeting him there after my conference. Well, we're going to make sure you get there rested, Dylan said, his voice all business again, but still warm. We've got your favourites all stocked. That single malt scotch you like, Maddox, and I made sure we have the Veuve Clicquot La Grande Dame for you, Elsa. He then turned, finally noticing Catherine standing there, her face pale, her orange Birkin bag suddenly looking garish and absurd. Dylan's warm smile instantly vanished. It was replaced by the cool, polite mask of the purser. "Ma'am?" he asked, his tone flat. Catherine, flustered and wrong-footed, could only thrust her boarding pass forward. "2A." Dylan barely glanced at it. "Yes, to your left, second row." He then turned his full attention back to the Harrisons, effectively dismissing her. "Come on, family. Let me show you to your suites. Leo, I've already preloaded the new Galaxy Quest game on your monitor." "Awesome," Leo beamed. As the Harrisons were personally escorted into the first-class cabin, Catherine was left to follow in their wake, a ghost of indignation and confusion. She had mocked a family for not belonging, only to watch them be greeted like royalty. Her assumptions were crumbling, and the flight hadn't even taken off. The first-class cabin on Aero Meridian Global's A380 was a sanctuary of understated luxury. It wasn't gaudy, it was private. Each suite was a self-contained pod with high walls, a plush lie-flat seat, a massive entertainment screen, and its own minibar. Dylan personally showed the Harrisons to their seats in the very first row. "We have you all here in 1A, C, D, and G, so you have the whole front row." "This is perfect, Dylan." "Thank you," Elsa said, already sliding her tablet into the side pocket. "My pleasure," Dylan replied. "Chloe, our other first-class attendant, will be by in a moment with pre-departure beverages. Anything you need, and I mean anything, you just let me know." "We will, Dylan." "Thanks," Maddox said, settling in. Catherine Beaumont, meanwhile, found her own seat. 2A. As the gate agent had gleefully noted, it was directly behind Maddox. She could see the top of his head over the suite wall, and she could hear everything. She slumped into her seat, her face burning. She was used to being the center of attention, the most important person in any room. Here she was a non-entity. Worse, she was the villain. Another flight attendant, a young, bright-eyed woman named Chloe, appeared at her side. "Good afternoon, Miss Beaumont. Can I get you started with some champagne, orange juice, or water?" "Champagne," Catherine snapped, still fuming. "And make sure it's the good stuff, not that cheap Prosecco." "We are serving Charles de Casanova Brut before takeoff, ma'am," Chloe said, with a tight smile, unfazed by the rudeness. "Fine," Catherine muttered. Chloe then moved to the front row, her entire demeanor changing, just as Dylan's had. Her voice became warm and genuine. "Dr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison, more champagne, and Leo, Maya, we have our signature honey lemonade spritzers for you." "That sounds amazing, Chloe, thank you," Elsa replied. Catherine watched this interaction over the rim of her glass, her knuckles white. Dr. Harrison? Mrs. Harrison? Who were these people? A doctor and... what, a teacher? Maybe he was a doctor of philosophy or something useless. It didn't make sense. She pulled out her phone, intending to text her husband, Anthony, about the communist flight crew, who clearly favored certain passengers. But before she could, Dylan Armstrong's voice came over the cabin PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Aero Meridian Global Flight 850 to London. My name is Dylan Armstrong, and I am your purser. We are just completing our final checks, and will be pushing back from the gate shortly. Our flight time tonight will be 10 hours and 15 minutes. I'd like to extend a very special welcome to our 10 million miler guests and our Aero Meridian Executive Club members. As always, it is a privilege to have you with us." Catherine scoffed. 10 million miler. That was practically impossible. You'd have to live on a plane. As the plane pushed back, taxied, and finally thundered down the runway into the twilight, Catherine stewed. She tried to reassert her dominance. She rang her call bell. Ding! Chloe appeared instantly. Yes, Miss Beaumont? This amenity kit, Catherine said, holding up the small Bulgari bag. Is this all? The last time I flew this route, we got pajamas. Of course, ma'am. The pajamas are right here, Chloe said, pulling a sealed bag from an overhead compartment. What size would you like? Medium, Catherine sniffed. And my headphones, they're crackling. I'll replace those for you right away, Chloe said, her smile never wavering. Ding. A minute later, Catherine rang again. Chloe returned. Yes, ma'am? This menu, Catherine said, tapping the leather-bound book. The halibut. Is it wild caught or farm-raised? I simply cannot abide farm-raised fish. I will check with the galley right now, Miss Beaumont. Catherine was trying to establish her credentials as an experienced, demanding, important flyer, but it was having the opposite effect. She just looked petty. Meanwhile, in the row ahead, the Harrisons were quiet. Maddox had his noise-cancelling headphones on and was typing on his laptop. Elsa was reading. The children were watching movies. They hadn't asked for a single thing. When Chloe went to Maddox to take his dinner order, he pulled off his headphones. Catherine leaned forward, unabashedly eavesdropping. Dr. Harrison, Mr. Armstrong mentioned you might just prefer the simple grilled chicken and salad tonight, rather than the full menu. He said you had a long week. That sounds perfect, Chloe, thank you, Maddox said with a grateful smile. And if it's not too much trouble, just a sparkling water with lime. Of course. Catherine was aghast. He was in a first-class suite, with a menu full of lobster, filet mignon, and caviar, and he ordered chicken salad. The man was a fraud. She leaned back, her theory solidifying. They weren't rich, they were connected. The flight attendant, Dylan, was some old college friend who was giving them the royal treatment. They were imposters, enjoying perks they hadn't earned. This thought comforted her. She was still superior. They were just lucky. This comfort lasted until the plane reached cruising altitude and the Wi-Fi signal chimed on. Once the plane was stable at 39,000 feet, the meal service began. Catherine Beaumont, having confirmed the halibut was, in fact, wild caught, settled in with her second, or perhaps third, glass of champagne. She put on her own headphones and started a video call with her husband, Anthony. She was just quiet enough not to be admonished, but just loud enough for anyone nearby to hear her side of the conversation. Anthony, you will not believe the flight. It's a disaster. Yes, the lounge was full of, well, you know, just people. And then at the gate, this family. No, not that kind of family. Yes, exactly. They were dressed like they were going to the gym. And they tried to board with me. The gate agent let them on. Can you believe it? The purser seems to know them. It's all very political. Probably some diversity initiative. It's just not what it used to be. In the row ahead, Maya nudged her father. He was working, but he'd taken his headphones off. He had heard. Elsa had heard. Maddox simply shook his head, signaling to his daughter that it wasn't worth it. After the meal, the lights in the cabin were dimmed. Most passengers settled in to sleep. Catherine, however, was restless. Her curiosity and indignation were a toxic cocktail. She had to know who these people were. She opened her laptop and connected to the expensive in-flight Wi-Fi. What had the purser called him? Dr. Maddox Harrison. She typed Dr. Maddox Harrison into Google. The results flooded her screen. Her blood ran cold. The first result wasn't for a doctor of philosophy. It was a link to Stanford Medicine. Dr. Maddox Harrison, MD, PhD, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. The next was a Wikipedia page. Maddox A. Harrison, is an American cardiothoracic surgeon and medical researcher, pioneer of the Harrison valve non-invasive heart valve replacement, recipient of the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Catherine's hands began to shake. Nobel Prize. She frantically clicked on images. There he was in surgical scrubs. There he was in a tuxedo, shaking hands with the King of Sweden. There he was on the cover of Time magazine, captioned, "The Man Who Mends Hearts." She wasn't done. What about the wife, Elsa Harrison? Dr. Elsa Harrison, J.D., Ph.D., Professor of International Law, Harvard University. The next link was to C-SPAN, showing her testifying before Congress about human rights law. The next was an article in Forbes titled, "The 100 Most Powerful Women in Law." Catherine felt physically ill. She felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple. But the purser, Dylan, he had mentioned a father. "Your father told me you were flying. He's golfing in Scotland." She went back to Google. Maddox Harrison father. The search results adjusted. Maddox Harrison, son of business magnate Charles F. Harrison. Catherine's breath hitched. Charles F. Harrison. She knew that name. Everyone who flew knew that name. She opened a new tab. Charles F. Harrison. The first result was the corporate page for Aero Meridian Global. The company bio read, "Founded in 1985 by visionary entrepreneur Charles F. Harrison, Aero Meridian Global, HGA, began as a small regional carrier and grew into one of the world's most awarded airlines." She stared at the letters. HGA Harrison, Global, Airways. The man in seat 1A was the founder's son. He wasn't a diversity hire or a lucky recipient of flyer miles. He owned, or stood to inherit, a significant portion of the very airline she was sitting on. He wasn't in first class. He was first class. Catherine Beaumont slowly closed her laptop. The cabin, once a symbol of her status, suddenly felt like a trap. She was in a metal tube, 39,000 feet in the air, having just humiliated the son of the company's founder and a Nobel Prize-winning surgeon. She looked at the call button, suddenly desperate for a glass of water, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. She couldn't face Chloe. She definitely couldn't face Dylan Armstrong. She was trapped. For the next 4 hours, Catherine did not move. She feigned sleep, her expensive silk eye mask pulled down tight, her body rigid with shame and fear. Every time a flight attendant walked by, she flinched, terrified they were coming to confront her. But they didn't. The cabin remained peaceful. The Harrisons slept. Maddox and Elsa, in their lie-flat beds, were resting. The children were quiet. To them, the incident was over. They were professionals at moving on. Catherine, however, could not. Her mind was replaying the scene at the gate, her own words echoing in her ears. "Can you even afford this? People like you. Don't try to sneak on." She had said those things to a man whose family name was likely painted on the tail of the plane. As the flight crossed over the coast of Greenland, the plane began to shudder. It started as a gentle vibration, but quickly escalated. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed on, waking the cabin. The captain's voice came over the PA, calm but firm. "Folks, this is your captain speaking. We've hit a rather unexpected patch of rough air. We're going to ask all passengers and flight attendants to please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts immediately. I'll have the cabin crew secure the galley just as soon as this smooths out." Chloe and Dylan, who had been preparing for the pre-landing breakfast service, rushed to lock the carts. Catherine, who had just managed to build up the courage to get herself a glass of water, had her drink on the small console next to her. Beside it, she had also poured herself a large glass of the deep red Cabernet Sauvignon that was left over from dinner, hoping it would calm her nerves. Then, the plane dropped. It was not a dip, it was a stomach-lurching, free-fall sensation that lasted for 2 terrifying seconds. It was followed by a violent lateral shake. In that moment, physics took over. The full glass of dark red wine, propelled by the violent lurch, lifted off the console. It seemed to hang in the air for a millisecond before arcing directly toward Catherine. The wine hit her with a splash. It wasn't just a spill, it was a deluge. Her pristine $3,000 cream-colored silk blouse was instantly, irrevocably stained a deep, sickening purple. The wine cascaded down her front, splashing onto her white trousers, a modern art painting of her own humiliation. Catherine shrieked. It was a raw, primal sound of loss and fury. "My blouse! It's ruined! It's ruined!" The plane stabilized, but the damage was done. Chloe, having strapped herself into her jump seat, unbuckled and rushed over, her face a picture of professional concern. "Ms. Beaumont, are you all right?" "No, I am not all right," Catherine screamed, now standing up, which was against the rules. "This is a couture blouse. This is unacceptable. This is... She was hysterical, the wine dripping from her onto the beige carpet. The commotion had, of course, woken up the entire cabin. Maddox and Elsa had their reading lights on, looking back with concern. "Miss Beaumont, please, you must sit down," Chloe pleaded, holding a stack of napkins that were clearly no match for the disaster. "I will not sit down. This is ruined. What are you going to do about it?" At that moment, Elsa Harrison unbuckled her own seatbelt. She calmly walked from 1D to 2A, holding something in her hand. She stood in front of the hysterical, wine-soaked Catherine. She didn't smirk. She didn't say, "I told you so." Her face was one of simple, dispassionate concern. "Ma'am, that looks awful," Elsa said, her voice calm and steady. "I have a spare shirt in my carry-on. It's just a black t-shirt, but it's clean and dry. Would you like it?" She held it out. A simple, folded black t-shirt. This act of kindness was, for Catherine, the final, crushing blow. It was worse than any insult. The woman she had mocked, the woman she had tried to humiliate, was now offering her charity. The wife of one of the most powerful men in medicine, the son of the airline's founder, was offering her a t-shirt. The sheer, staggering gap between her own behavior and Elsa's quiet dignity was on full display for the entire first-class cabin to see. Catherine stared at the t-shirt as if it were a snake. Her face, already red from crying, went a shade deeper. "I don't need your help," she spat, though the words had no venom left. They were hollow. She grabbed the airline-provided pajamas from Chloe and stormed off toward the lavatory, defeated, to change out of her ruined designer outfit. Elsa simply sighed, put the t-shirt back in her bag, and returned to her seat. Maddox looked at his wife. "That was kind of you, Elle." "She was cold," Elsa said, buckling her belt. "And loud." For the rest of the flight, Catherine Beaumont didn't emerge. She stayed in her seat, hidden under an airline blanket, wearing the scratchy, standard-issue navy pajamas. She was, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly invisible. The plane landed at Heathrow under a grey, drizzling sky. The fasten seatbelt sign turned off. Dylan Armstrong's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at London Heathrow. We ask that you remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate. On behalf of Aero Meridian Global and this entire crew, it has been our pleasure. And personally," his voice warmed, "we'd like to wish the Harrison family a wonderful stay in London." Catherine, still in her airline pajamas, felt the final twist of the knife. She waited until every other first-class passenger, especially the Harrisons, had deplaned before she dared to show her face. She grabbed her orange Birkin, a tragic accessory to her outfit of shame, and scurried off the plane, avoiding eye contact with Dylan, who stood at the door, bidding passengers farewell. He didn't say a word to her. Her husband, Anthony Beaumont, was waiting for her at baggage claim. Anthony was a man who lived in a state of perpetual anxiety. He was a senior vice president at Beaumont Investments, a major international bank, and he was on the cusp of making partner. His entire life was about managing optics. When he saw his wife stomp out in airline pajamas, her hair a wreck, his face turned pale. "Catherine, what on earth happened to you? Where is your outfit?" "The turbulence," she hissed. "And the worst service I have ever had. That airline." "Get the bags, Anthony. I need to get to the hotel. The gala is tonight, and I look like a common vagrant." "The gala," Anthony repeated, his anxiety rising. Yes. Everything has to be perfect tonight, Catherine. Mr. Fairfield, the global CEO, is in town. This is my night. This is our promotion. Please, just pull it together." "I am pulled together," she snapped. That evening, at a glittering ballroom in Mayfair, the Global Children's Surgical Fund Gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, champagne flowed, and the most powerful people in London and New York finance mingled, their voices a low, wealthy hum. Catherine Beaumont, now miraculously transformed, was back in her element. She was poured into a stunning $10,000 dark green evening gown, her hair and makeup flawless. The flight was a distant memory. She was Catherine Beaumont, and this was her world. Anthony, in his tuxedo, was anxiously scanning the room for his boss. "There he is," Anthony whispered, grabbing Catherine's elbow. "That's Robert Fairfield, the CEO. Be charming." "I'm always charming, Anthony," she said, patting her hair. They made their way over. "Mr. Fairfield, a pleasure to see you, sir," Anthony said, his voice a little too eager. "Anthony, good to see you. And this must be your wife, Catherine," Fairfield said, a powerful man with a shark's smile. "A pleasure to meet you, Robert," Catherine said, offering her hand. "This is a stunning event. The fund is such a worthy cause." "It is indeed," Fairfield said. "We're very proud to be the primary sponsor. But the real star tonight is our keynote speaker. The man is a living legend. Frankly, we're just lucky to have him. He's the entire reason the Harrison Foundation chose to partner with us." Anthony's ears perked up. The Harrison Foundation? The philanthropic arm of Era Meridian Global. "A multi-billion-dollar account, Anthony," Fairfield said, his eyes gleaming. "The account your division has been failing to land for 3 years. Well, I landed it. All thanks to my friendship with their lead trustee." Before Anthony could respond, the lights dimmed and a man walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please give a warm welcome to our guest of honor. He is the man who revolutionized cardiac surgery, the recipient of this year's Nobel Prize in Medicine, and the lead trustee of the Harrison Foundation. Please welcome Dr. Maddox Harrison." Catherine Beaumont's champagne flute slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered, silencing their table. Anthony stared at her. "Catherine? What is it?" But Catherine couldn't speak. She was staring at the stage. There he was, the man from the airport, the man in the grey hoodie and joggers. He was now wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, standing in a spotlight, looking out over the 500 most powerful people in the city. He looked completely at home. "Thank you," Dr. Harrison began, his voice the same calm, steady tone she remembered from the gate. "Tonight I want to talk about value. We, in this room, are used to value. The value of a stock, the value of a company. But at the fund, we are concerned with a different value. The value of a human life. The value of empathy. Catherine was ghost white. Anthony, looking from his wife to the stage, was slowly, horribly, beginning to understand. "Catherine," Anthony whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" Dr. Harrison's speech was, by all accounts, brilliant. He spoke of his work in underprivileged nations, of the children he had operated on, of the vital need for funds. He was charming, humble, and powerful. He received a standing ovation. Catherine and Anthony, however, remained seated. They hadn't heard a word. Anthony was busy grilling his wife in a furious, panicked whisper. "The man on the plane? The man you told me was riffraff. That was Maddox Harrison." "How was I supposed to know?" Catherine whimpered, her facade crumbling. "He was wearing a hoodie." "You're an idiot, Catherine. A complete and utter idiot," Anthony hissed, his career flashing before his eyes. As the applause died down, Dr. Harrison walked off the stage and was immediately swarmed by admirers. Robert Fairfield, the CEO, was first in line, clapping him on the back. "Maddox, brilliant as always," Fairfield boomed. "Thank you, Robert. It's a great cause," Maddox replied. "Listen, I'm so glad your flight over was smooth," Fairfield said. "I told my people to tell Aero Meridian to take extra special care of you." Maddox laughed, a dry, short sound. "Well, the flight was excellent, as always. Dylan Armstrong took great care of us. The airport, however, that was a different story." Fairfield's smile faltered. "Oh? What happened?" "Oh, just a rather unpleasant passenger at the gate. A woman. Very loud. Made quite a scene about my family not belonging in first class. You know the type." Fairfield's face darkened. "I do, indeed." "That's appalling, Maddox. I'm so sorry." "It's fine," Maddox said, shrugging. "We're used to it. But it was notable. She was very proud of who she was. Kept talking about her husband, Anthony, who works for your bank, funny enough. A Beaumont, I think she said. Catherine Beaumont." Robert Fairfield went completely still. The smile was gone, replaced by a glacial cold. He looked past Maddox, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on table 12, where Anthony and Catherine were sitting, frozen in horror. Maddox, a man who had not risen to his position without being observant, saw the look. "Robert, is something wrong?" Fairfield turned back to Maddox, forcing a tight smile. "No, Maddox. Nothing at all. Just a small personnel issue I need to handle. Now come, I must introduce you to the Duke." He steered Dr. Harrison away. At table 12, Anthony Beaumont was sweating through his tuxedo. "What did he say? What did Harrison say to him?" "I don't know. I couldn't hear," Catherine whispered, frantically dabbing her face with a napkin. They didn't have to wait long. Fairfield, having deposited Maddox with the Duke, began walking toward their table. He moved with the slow, deliberate pace of an executioner. He arrived and stood over them. He did not sit. "Anthony," he said, his voice quiet, which was far more terrifying than a yell. "Sir," Anthony squeaked, trying to stand. "Stay seated," Fairfield commanded. He looked at Catherine, his eyes filled with a contempt that made her airport confrontation look like child's play. "Miss Beaumont," Fairfield said, "I am told you had an eventful flight." Catherine couldn't speak. "The Harrison Foundation is our single largest new client," Fairfield continued, his voice a razor. "Their account is worth over $20 million in management fees to this bank, per year. It is the account that your division, Anthony, was supposed to land. The account that I had to personally secure through my relationship with Dr. Harrison." He leaned in closer. "And you, madam," he said to Catherine, "just stood in an airport and accused the lead trustee of that foundation of sneaking on. You, whose husband works for me, told the son of the founder of Aero Meridian Global that he couldn't afford to be there. Anthony made a small, choking sound. "Sir, She didn't know," Anthony stammered. "And that," Fairfield said, "is the problem. She didn't know." "Our values clause," he said, directing his words at Anthony, "isn't about how you treat the people you know are important. It's about how you treat the people you don't. You and your wife have just shown the entire Harrison family, and by extension me, what your values are. You are a liability, Anthony, a catastrophic liability." Catherine began to cry, thick mascara tears running down her cheeks. "Please." "It was a mistake." "Yes, it was," Fairfield agreed. "Don't bother coming in on Monday, Anthony. Your promotion to partner is, of course, denied. In fact, your employment is terminated. Have your desk cleared out by noon tomorrow. Security will escort you." He turned to Catherine, "And I would advise you to leave the gala. Your presence is an embarrassment to the bank." Robert Fairfield turned and walked away, rejoining the party as if nothing had happened. Anthony Beaumont sat, stunned, his life in ruins. Catherine was sobbing uncontrollably, her $10,000 dress now stained with tears and ruined makeup. The hard, swift and complete karma had landed. They had lost everything: the job, the promotion, the status, the reputation, all because Catherine Beaumont couldn't bear the sight of a black family in a first-class line. Across the room, Maddox and Elsa Harrison were laughing with the Duke, sipping champagne, completely unaware and unbothered by the social execution that had just taken place. They were too busy discussing their next project, funding a new pediatric surgical wing in South America. The fallout was not a distant storm. It was an immediate and devastating avalanche. For Anthony and Catherine Beaumont, the consequences began before Dr. Harrison's standing ovation had even finished echoing in the ballroom. Their ride back to the Dorchester was silent, a thick, suffocating blanket of dread and recrimination. Catherine's mascara-streaked face was a grotesque parody of the flawless mask she had worn just hours before. Anthony, his tuxedo feeling like a straitjacket, simply stared out the window, his mind a frantic reel of calculations. He was calculating the value of his stock options, the penalty on his pension, the sheer, astronomical cost of his wife's arrogance. They entered their suite, and the fragile silence shattered. "You," Anthony hissed, ripping off his bow tie. "You did this. 25 years. 25 years of my life, my career, gone, because you couldn't keep your mouth shut in an airport. I told you," Catherine shrieked, her voice raw. "How was I supposed to know? He was dressed like nothing. He looked like them." "Like them?" Anthony bellowed, his face purple. "You mean a black man? That's what this was? You saw a black family and your brain just short-circuited." Robert Fairfield's exact words, "Catherine." She didn't know. That's the problem. You're not supposed to need to know. You're supposed to not be a vile, prejudiced idiot. He threw his jacket, and it skidded across the room. "The Harrison Foundation! The Harrison Foundation! You mocked the family who owns the airline." "You're blaming me?" Catherine sobbed, sinking onto an absurdly expensive velvet chaise. "You're the one who's always pushing. We have to look the part, Catherine. We have to make connections, Catherine. This is your world. I was helping." "Helping?" Anthony laughed, a sound that was closer to a bark of despair. "You just executed my career. You put a bullet in its head. It's over." It was, in fact, already over. Anthony's phone, sitting on the marble nightstand, remained ominously silent. There was no late-night call from Robert Fairfield saying, "Things were heated. Let's talk in the morning." The sentence had been passed, and the execution was set for dawn. The 8:00 a.m. email was not from Fairfield. It was from a senior partner in human resources, a woman Anthony had hired. The subject line was cold. Notice of employment termination. The email was brief, citing a severe breach of the company's established values and ethics clause, and behavior resulting in catastrophic reputational damage to the firm. It informed him that his access had been revoked, and he was permitted a 2-hour window at noon to retrieve his personal items. A security guard would be his escort. The walk of shame was a masterpiece of corporate humiliation. When he arrived at the Beaumont Investments lobby, a place where his name had been spoken with reverence just 24 hours earlier, the receptionist wouldn't meet his eye. A stoic security guard named Michael, a man Anthony had often walked past without a glance, met him at the elevator. "Mr. Beaumont," Michael said, his tone flat. "Michael," Anthony replied, his voice a croak. The elevator ride up to the 40th floor was silent. When the doors opened, the entire trade floor went quiet. The whispers, the averted gazes, the sudden intense interest in spreadsheets. It was deafening. He was led to his corner office, where 2 more guards stood by the door. A stack of banker's boxes sat on his desk. He had 25 years of work, photos, awards, and deal tombstones. He realized with a sickening lurch it would all fit in a single box. He tried to make calls. He called his top headhunter. The headhunter's assistant, who usually fawned over him, was suddenly brisk. "Mr. Robertson is in an all-day meeting, Anthony. He'll have to get back to you." He never did. Anthony was not just fired. He was radioactive. By lunch, the entire story, in all its cringeworthy detail, was the hottest piece of gossip on Wall Street and in the financial heart of London. He was the man whose wife insulted Maddox Harrison. No firm would touch him. While Anthony was packing his professional life into a cardboard box, Catherine was receiving her own sentence, delivered by 1,000 social cuts. Her first call was to Camilla, her best friend, and the chair of the upcoming Children's Fund Committee. "Camilla, darling," Catherine began, her voice still shaky from crying, "you will not believe the most awful misunderstanding last night." "Catherine," Camilla's voice was ice. "I heard. We all heard. What you did. My husband works for Robert. He was apoplectic. But it was a mistake. I didn't—" "Goodbye, Catherine," Camilla said. "We just can't be associated with that. You understand." The line clicked. Then the emails began. The first was from the fund itself. "In light of recent events, the board feels it is in our best interest to accept your resignation, effective immediately." She hadn't offered it. The second was from the co-op board of her Park Avenue building, a courtesy reminder about the morality clause in their bylaws. Her hair salon. "So sorry, Ms. Beaumont. We're fully booked for the foreseeable future." She wasn't a pillar of her society. She was a decoration, tolerated and even feted because of the power and money Anthony provided. With that power gone, she was just the tacky, loud woman they had all been pretending not to notice. The financial collapse was swift. The bank called in the high-interest, variable-rate mortgage on their Park Avenue apartment. Their credit cards, all tied to Anthony's corporate accounts, were frozen. The life they had built, a life of leveraged luxury, was a house of cards. One gust of wind, one woman's ugly prejudice, and the entire thing came tumbling down. They sold the apartment at a loss. They sold the jewelry, the art, and Catherine's collection of Hermes bags, including the orange Birkin, in a desperate private fire sale to cover their debts. 6 months after the gala, they left New York in the dead of night, exiled. Their new home was a small, beige stucco condo in an anonymous development in inland Florida, a place with no galas, no charity boards, and no status. A month later, Maddox Harrison was in the galley of another Aero Meridian A380, this time flying from New York to Singapore. He had been working on his laptop, and he'd come back to stretch his legs. The purser for this flight, a face he didn't recognize, was busy, but in the back, helping the crew, was a familiar face. "Dylan," Maddox said, surprised. "What are you doing on the Singapore route?" "Maddox?" Dylan Armstrong grinned, wiping his hands on a towel. "Helping out a friend. They were short-staffed. Can't have my family's airline running late. Can I?" Maddox smiled. "Listen, Dylan, I've been meaning to ask you. I heard what happened to that woman, Miss Beaumont, and her husband." Dylan's smile softened. He leaned against the counter. "I heard too. The whole company heard. Robert Fairfield's office sent a formal apology to your fathers." "That's just it," Maddox said, his brow furrowed. He looked genuinely troubled. I feel responsible. I made that offhand comment to Robert. I never intended for them to be ruined." Dylan looked at Maddox, the Nobel Prize-winning surgeon who was worried about the fate of the woman who had publicly humiliated him. "Dr. Harrison," Dylan said, his voice low and serious, "I've been with this airline for 30 years. I've seen it all. I've seen billionaires in sweatpants and con artists in couture. I've seen people scream at my crew over a choice of peanuts, and I've seen people give up their first-class seat for a soldier flying home. This cabin, it's a test." "A test?" Maddox repeated. "Of character," Dylan said, nodding. "That woman wasn't just rude to you. She was rude to Sarah at the gate. She was rude to Chloe about the halibut. She was rude to everyone she thought was staff or beneath her. She failed the test. Every day she failed the test. The airport wasn't a single event. It was just the last time she'd get to show her true colors before it mattered." He continued, "You didn't get her husband fired. What you said to Mr. Fairfield wasn't the weapon. It was just the light that finally let him see a cancer he already had in his company. People like the Beaumonts, they live their whole lives on a cliff of arrogance, looking down on everyone else. You didn't push them off, Maddox. You just happened to be the person standing there when they finally lost their balance." Dylan picked up a glass and began polishing it. What happened to them? That wasn't revenge. That was just gravity. Maddox was quiet for a long moment, processing the ground crew wisdom. A weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lifted. He nodded. "Gravity." "Exactly," Dylan said, his warm smile returning. "Now, can I get you that scotch? Your father already called the flight manifest. He said you'd be working too hard and to make sure you had one." Maddox laughed, the sound full and unburdened. "In that case, absolutely. Thank you, Dylan." He returned to his seat, his conscience clear. Outside the window, the world was a blanket of dark ocean and stars. He closed his eyes, at peace, as the great plane, the plane with his family's name on it, flew on. And so, Catherine Beaumont's world, built on a fragile foundation of designer labels and prejudice, was brought down not by a grand gesture of revenge, but by simple, unavoidable consequences. She thought her status made her untouchable, but she learned that true status isn't about the clothes you wear or the seat you buy. It's about how you treat people. The Harrisons never sought revenge. They didn't have to. They were too busy changing the world. The hard karma that hit Catherine wasn't a plot by the Harrisons. It was a bill delivered by life for her own cruelty. She mocked a man she thought was beneath her, only to find out she was the one who couldn't afford the price of admission, the price of basic human decency. What did you think of Catherine's story? Do you believe this was true karma, or was the fallout too harsh? We read all of your comments and love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of drama, twists, and real-life justice, please make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.